Hi, I'm Harry Amplis for Pittsburgh Indie Expo 2025. Today I'm joined by John Peña, a multidisciplinary artist who explores the natural world and his daily interactions with others, and a special guest at Pittsburgh Indie Expo 2025. John, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, your work has origins in your fascination with geology. What life experiences led to your decision to harness that fascination into your art?
That's a great question. I think with geology, I originally am from Washington State, and it's pretty where we grew up is a vast kind of desert, high plains desert landscape. And so I was always really fascinated by the surroundings of that area. And my parents grew up working in the fields because it's like irrigated cropland there. So everything from apples to nectarines to asparagus to hops. And so I just took in the environment a whole lot. And then I remember when I was in college, I took a introductory course to geology. I was really blown away by it as a science and the idea of these slow, gradual actions like erosion happening over millions and millions of years, having the capacity to shape these kind of monumental structures that are imperceptible on the daily level. And I think that impacted me early on without even realizing it. And I found myself kind of adopting an artistic practice that modeled itself after geological processes. So what would happen if, I kind of thought to myself, like, what would happen if I myself was treated myself as part of this natural force? So what daily actions could I do that would over time accumulate and build into some larger shape? And so that's when I first started sending a letter to the Pacific Ocean, which I did every day for 12 years. And then in that project, it was largely about the process the letter went on and then the return of the letter and kind of all the interactions along that. But I found myself journaling a lot in those letters. And I think later in the years, I found myself drawing more and more. And I was like, oh, I think there's something different emerging here. And that's where they divided. And I stopped doing letters to the ocean and started making daily geology, which is a drawing project where every day for the last 15 years, I've made a drawing about my day. And so for me, I'm interested in modeling those natural systems as a way of both creating a sustainable art practice, but also making something that on the daily level you can't see what's emerging. It's only over months and years that things begin to take shape.
So, have you found that you need a certain level of discipline to keep making a drawing every single day?
Sure, yeah, but I don't know if it's any different a discipline than going to work or brushing your teeth every day. I think
Yeah,
it's
of course.
like, I think it's more just, yeah, it's like not like yeah, I think if you can navigate brushing your teeth every day, you can make a drawing every day. It doesn't have to be a good drawing.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always
you're
tell
so
people
right.
that when they're like, "How do you make a drawing every day?" I'm like, "It doesn't have to be good. I never said it was good. It's like
Right,
you can make a ton of crap and it's okay because it's all part of the process, you know?"
absolutely. So, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced on your path to establishing yourself as an artist?
Um, Biggest challenge I think is primarily financial because it's economics, right? It's like just being an artist is very difficult. I mean, just living is just surviving is very difficult. So being an artist on
Mhm.
top, is pretty challenging. Yeah, I think that's the one that's been the hardest for me. The creativity and the discipline, those kind of things, those come in time and with attention and kind of deliberate action and discovery. But I think just figuring out how to navigate being able to support myself, my family, and help out where I can has been one of the hardest things, constantly balancing that. And I think I meet younger artists who are, they perceive me as like having made it in some way where I'm like an artist that people recognize his name and he does these projects. And I'm like, no, I'm really close to you. Like we're right next to each other. The only thing I have on you is like I've been doing it a little longer, but in terms of like, paying the bills, it's like still working different jobs, putting things together, work art things when I can, do other freelance things when I can, putting it together to yeah, to take care of things and also be able to give myself enough time to be making work too.
Right. So, what are the origins of your relationship with the city of Pittsburgh? And how has working closely with the local communities influenced your approach to your work?
Oh wow, yeah, that's been pretty transitional, or like pretty huge in a transitional way. Well, I originally came here for school in 20 or in 2005, and At the time, I came to Carnegie Mellon because I was really, they had a strong kind of public art program.
Mhm.
It was at the time, I think they called it, it was before they called it, I'm trying to think of like the terminology now. It'd be like socially engaged social practice. Those are kind of the contemporary terminologies. Um, but it was something similar to that. And that was really good because it was like I got to experiment and learn a lot and read a lot, and do different projects during my time. And then I left Pittsburgh for a couple of years to do some projects. And then I ended up coming back here, I think in 2011, and started working with some artists. And that was pretty influential. But I think one of the one of the biggest impacts came when I did the project, the Larimer Stories project in 2018. And that was, they did an open call for artists wanting to work in public contexts. And I interviewed, well, here's the gist of it. At the time, it was a collaboration between Shiftworks Public Community and Public Art and Neighborhood Allies. And the idea was they wanted to pick artists to work in these particular neighborhoods that they had partnerships with they would create new works of temporary public art. So kind of contrary to the idea of like an artist being hired and like you make whatever you want and you plop it down, right? Or
Right.
like you make whatever or you have a preconceived idea of what you're going to do and then you make it.
Mhm.
This was like, no, we don't want any preconceptions. We want you very much to collaborate. And so that was pretty great. I interacted and interviewed with the Larimer Consensus Group at the time with Stanley Holbrook was the chair. Later, now it's Donna Jackson. And we interviewed really well, and we had a lot of similar interests and overlap. And so, working with the Larimer Consensus Group, the first idea was I wanted to get to know more about the neighborhood. So, I proposed doing interviews where I'd pay people, I think $25 for a half-hour interview,
Mhm.
just talking about their experiences living in the neighborhood, growing up in the neighborhood, moving to the neighborhood. And I found myself interviewing senior citizens the most. I was re-interviewing them over and over because they were such a wealth of information. And so then I talked to Donna at the time and said, hey, can we do like a senior luncheon where every month we get together and we talk about potentially collaborating on a project and sharing stories? And she was really excited. She had already been doing something kind of informally. So we put it together and it was great to have all the seniors together and learn about each other. And that's how we ended up doing the sign project where we shared stories there on 200 Larimer Ave at a busy intersection on a sign where it changed out every 2 weeks to share stories from the oldest residents in the neighborhood. And then with that, I became friends with the oldest resident at the time when I met him. He was 97, Mr. Tony, Mr. Anthony Miniero, and we became friends pretty quickly, like over shared interest of working in the yard and going to Aldi and getting groceries. And we just became friends. And that was really great making that connection. And so through working and building trust with this group of senior citizens in the neighborhood, we decided to keep working together. So we've been working together since then, and we still have our monthly luncheons.
Yeah. And Mr. Tony became a huge part of your project Daily Geology.
Oh
He
yeah,
even has three whole books in his name.
yeah, he
Um,
does. Yeah, three. That's right. A fourth one coming out for Pi.
oh, that's awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what have you learned from your friendship with Mr. Tony, and how has he inspired you?
I mean, he's been huge. There's a section in the book I made where it talks about how my wife pointed out that our yard looks a lot nicer ever since I met Tony. And I think it was because when I'd hang out with him, we'd work in pruning some bushes and like we'd work on his yard. And then I'd be like, oh, I should work on my yard when I'm, it's not that we left it neglected. It's just that working with Tony made me realize how much I like doing it and also how much I like shaping things and all that. I'm like a sculptor too. And like, I think he would have been a sculptor, no problem. Like he very much had that inclination toward kind of shaping objects and stuff like that. He very much it was a sculptor in that way, and his work was very public in that it was on the intersection of like, his neighborhood. So I think that was a big thing. I think more than anything, Tony just really, I was always stuck in my head or I was worried about something or I was distracted and I stopped by and saw him, he immediately brought me into the present moment because we had something to do. We were working in the yard, we were talking about history, we were doing something. And he'd always kind of pull me into myself in the moment, in a relational engagement with the world. And I think that that's huge because it's really easy for me to live in a non-relational engagement with the world or in a social media engagement with the world or I just have to get from point A to point B and not do anything in between, right? Like, got to go to the bank, got to go to the post office. I'm just going to get it done as quickly as possible. But Tony, I think, was a good influence because he would force me without even realizing it when I'm at the post office to be like looking at people, studying things, like listening, talking to people, holding the door open for people, like just the like mundane minutia of everyday life that contributes to quality of life for everybody, I think was a big influence.
So, in addition to being a special guest at Pi this year, you're an advisor as well. How has your participation in Pittsburgh's local art community led to your participation at Pi?
Well, I think it was everybody organizing Pi has just done incredible things for the comics community, from the drawing board, just zine fair, just like everybody's been killing it over there in a really great way. So when they asked me,
Awesome
I
to
was like,
hear.
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, sign me up. I'll help however I can. I don't even think I heard what they needed me for. I just said, sign me up. It's just like,
Oh,
whatever
awesome.
you need.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I mean, I feel I'm in a lot of different worlds, right? I'm in the public art world, comics world, um, drawing in a kind of more traditional gallery exhibition space. And I kind of overlap a lot of these different worlds. And I feel like, yeah, however I'm able to contribute, that's exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And
Yeah.
I'd just like to ask you one last question here. So, how would you like to move forward in life with your art?
That's a great question. How would
Mhm.
I like to move forward? Um, I don't know. It's always a discovery for me. I think it's kind of a mystery in a lot of ways. Whereas I think when I first started making art, I thought of things in more project based, like just discrete modular terms, where it's like, oh, I'm going to do this project, and then that project's over, and now I move on to this project. And I think certainly working in a public art context and working with the Larimer seniors has changed my practice in a huge way, where you know, we started working together in 2017 and we're still working together in 2025. And it's like, there's so many little things that came out of that. There's the sign project we did. There's the Tony books. There's another thing called a newsletter that we created during the pandemic. There are field trips we take, right? That's just like all these things I could have never anticipated. And they also don't neatly fit into like here's this thing I did, right? Like, whereas if it's a project I did years ago, I can be like, here's this discrete thing I did, and it's a complete package with concept and execution and exhibition. Whereas
Yeah.
this other thing, I think with the seniors, I think reflects an innate desire that I already have with geology, which is about long-term engagement and long-term uh, shaping through not being aware of how it's being shaped, but being engaged in a meaningful way and allowing that to give shape to these things, which is I think what happened with the seniors in a lot of ways. And I think I feel that happening in my drawing process too, where it's like I have made over 15 years of drawings, and I took 2 of those years and I put them on a grid so you could see like the value shifts. You can't read any of the drawings, but you can see like dark light, dark light. And I put the 2 years next together and realized that almost half of the year they got super light and then they went back to being dark. And when I go through the drawing, I was able to realize like, oh, that was when I was having a lot more anxiety and I was having trouble committing to making marks on paper because of the apprehension about when one struggles with anxiety, you don't want to make a peep, you don't want to make a move, right? You're like you're kind of gingerly, and I was like, wow, like I didn't realize it because I was in it, but now looking at the marks I made, you can see how it affected my hand. So
Yeah.
those kind of things are exciting for me to discover moving into the future.
Awesome. So, John, where can people find your work?
You can find me johnpena.net or just Google search John Pena art. So that's my website, but also I'm on Instagram at John Pena Studio. I'm primarily only on Instagram, maybe Facebook every so often. I don't really do a lot of text heavy stuff, or I'm not tweeting that often. Or what do they call it now? I'm gonna keep dead naming Twitter.
Yeah.
Tweeting,
Yeah.
call it whatever.
Me too.
Yeah, so you can find me johnpena.net, or you can find me at John Peña Studio on Instagram. And then also on my website, I know people always want to know where they can either read more about it, or if they wanted to pick up a book, you can find it at my shop at johnpena.net. There's a shop online and people buy books there too.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
people can see you in person on
Oh
March
yeah, I'll
30th
be
at
tabling it pie. Yeah, I'll be debuting my new Tony book too. So that'll be really exciting. I'll be hopefully in the next couple of days posting for pre-orders, so people can pre-order if they're not able to make it, or if they'd like to get it, in advance or whatnot. I'll be giving info on my social media for that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, John.
Yep.
All
Thanks for
right.
having me. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. See you at Pi.